Hello there, welcome to the Worldbuilding series. In this episode we're going to talk about magic systems and how they help define a unique rule set for your world. In many ways I believe that magic systems are at the core of your world, or at least they can be. But I also have a slightly different interpretation of magic systems than most people. I already touched upon this a little bit in the very first episode, but to me magic systems are the unique rule set of your world. And the unique rule set are the rules that are different from the normal world, so that sort of dictates what can happen in your fictional world. And this unique rule set will continue to affect things like technology, warfare, the events, the characters, and so on of your world. A classic example of a magic system is the Force in Star Wars. It's pretty clear what the Force is, but it's not always clear exactly what the Force can do. But we do know that characters in the universe can use this Force for various purposes. But the Force also helps shape the major events of the world and even shape the characters themselves. It almost transcends what's going on. Avatar: The Last Airbender also has a pretty clear magic system where the benders control one of the different four elements. But in comparison to the Force, Avatar has sort of stricter rules for the magic system, what can be done and what can't be done. And here we could go into the discussion of hard magic versus soft magic, but I just want to touch on something a little bit different before that. I wanted to look at Jurassic Park. I think most of us would say that Jurassic Park does not have a magic system, but in my mind it sort of does. In the world of Jurassic Park there apparently exists a technology, some science that allows for the creation of dinosaurs. And this is not currently possible in the real world. And yes, this is more grounded in real science as opposed to supernatural forces, but I think the effect it's having on story and world building is the same as other magic systems, because what it does is it creates a unique rule set in the world for the writers to do something interesting storytelling wise. So I'm stretching the definition of a magic system a little bit here, and maybe you're more comfortable calling Jurassic Park sci-fi, and maybe you're more comfortable calling something like the Force in Star Wars a fantasy magic system, and that'd be totally okay. But I think there's something really interesting to be explored here. For me there are two major reasons why I like to define magic systems like this. Firstly, I think we often think of magic systems as only existing in a fantasy setting, and I think that really limits the references we can use for developing our own magic system. And I think it also limits where we might see a magic system take place, like in something like Jurassic Park, or a sci-fi setting, or a psychological thriller or something like that. Secondly, while there are many fantastical magic systems that I really love, that just serve some sort of power fantasy, they look cool, they can do amazing things, for me the most powerful magic systems are the ones that have an impact on the story and the world. And by that logic, I like to define magic systems as the unique rule set that allows for scenarios impossible in the real world, but can really expand on the human experience. If your magic system just ends up being an analog for weapons, then it doesn't do much more than a gun or a sword. And yes, a story about magic warfare set in a magic Cold War could be super interesting, but I think in the abstract, thinking about how your magic system could influence your story and your world will in turn help you create more interesting magic systems, in my experience. So in general, people make a distinction between hard and soft magic, and while I think this is a great thing to keep in mind, I don't think you should take it as a rule, and also not as an either or thing. I think in general, when looking at fiction, we're mostly looking at a spectrum. Hard magic systems are often depicted as having clear-cut rules. We know what the users can do, and we know what they can't do. How the characters use those limitations and strategically work around them is what creates the intrigue and excitement for the viewer. And this is directly related to how well the viewer understands the functions of the magic system. Avatar: The Last Airbender is a great case for hard magic systems. We see and understand how the earthbending works in the world, and then when we see how they then use that bending to create trains and doors, we feel rewarded for the adaptation of that rule set. And it also showcases something else that's quite nice. Because of the way earthbending is part of their everyday life, it changes the world building itself. It becomes a tool set for world building, not just a part of the world. Soft magic systems, on the other hand, is something we would see in something like Lord of the Rings. The magic of Gandalf and the other wizards is not entirely clear. We don't exactly know what they can do, and they seem to be able to just do whatever the story needs at the time. I think soft magic systems appeal to our sense of wonder and mysticism in the world, and that can be a really nice thing to experience, but it can also feel like a sort of Deus Ex Machina moment where the day was saved just because the wizard could do that one piece of magic just at the right time, and it doesn't feel as rewarding as something like a hard magic system could offer. And so it's something you have to be careful with and use it sparingly. I think the division between hard and soft magic systems makes sense, but let's explore the spectrum a little bit more. In Middle-earth, for example, we know that the sword sting glows blue when orcs are nearby. That's, to me, a hard magic system. This is always true, and this exists within a world that also has other soft magic systems, like the magic of Gandalf. And in Avatar: The Last Airbender, we don't actually know exactly how much fire or how much earth the different benders can move, and the magic of the spirits is pretty vague and feels very soft and mystical. And I think sometimes the more vague magic of the spirits can feel so detached from the main magic system that it actually starts feeling unrewarding to see something like that, and it doesn't feel wondrous anymore. So the balance here is quite tricky, and it's just something you have to develop a feel for. So the idea of having a 100% hard or soft magic system is pretty rare. It certainly exists and it's out there, but I think it's rare, and I think it's done on purpose. I think it appeals to our human nature. We do like to believe that there's more out there than meets the eye, but we also like rules and systems and limitations, and we find creativity when characters use those limitations to do something amazing. And some of us might lean more towards one or the other, or some of us just want a general mix of things, but from this I will draw some general conclusions that I wish to share. You might have heard the saying, rules are meant to be broken. Well, no, they're there so you don't break them. But I do believe that rules are more interesting when broken. We know that seeing rules broken sparks our curiosity. Why did that happen? And you can use that to your advantage. And you don't always have to break them, you can also just bend them a little bit. I think this can help you if you struggle with making your magic system and everything doesn't actually line up. We might actually find it appealing as humans, but it's a very sensitive balance there, so you really have to feel it out and test it out. But it can happen if it sparks curiosity to what is going on, as opposed to, that's not how the system works, that's wrong. So in short, if the rules of your magic systems are harder, then don't break them as much, try instead to bend them. If the magic system is softer, you're more free to break them, if need be. Both can live side by side, but I would recommend having the harder magic systems be more prevalent in the world because it's more reliable, and only have the softer magic peep in once in a while to not entirely derail your audience. To answer this, I think as a world builder, you don't always have to make the rules of your magic system clear to your audience unless it's an integral part of their enjoyment of your world. What I usually do is this. I like to design hard magic systems. It allows for more world building and allows for sort of creative exploration, more so than soft magic systems do. But I like to present it as a soft magic system, only give the audience little hints of how it functions, and then throughout their exploration they understand how the things work and they feel rewarded for seeing those pieces. I think that really balances out the two in a really nice way. It appeals to our sense of wonder and mysticism, but it also rewards that logical part of your brain. But that's just my personal preference. Alright, I just want to add some thoughts to the idea of using your magic system to build your world. I think in worlds like Star Wars, it's pretty clear how the Force helped influence the Jedi Order, the Sith Order, and the general sort of religions and tie-ins to that particular magic system. And in Avatar, it's also quite clear how the bending affects the everyday lives of the people there. And going with my slightly stretched definition of magic systems here, I want to look at Jurassic Park again. So Jurassic Park has this unique gene technology that allows them to bring dinosaurs back from the dead. And now this can be done in this world, and that also means they can create theme parks filled with dinosaurs, they can create islands with dinosaurs, and now they can also create new dinosaurs in the newer movies, which are not my favorites, but they create this Indominus Rex, and it's this crazy super dinosaur with all these genes from different dinosaurs, and it causes havoc and destruction. But a really big turning point in Jurassic World, if you haven't seen it, is when they use the raptors to hunt down this escaped Indominus Rex. But when they arrive at the Indominus Rex, they learn that the Indominus Rex also has part raptor in it, completely subverting what the characters thought would happen. They tried to outmaneuver the magic system. They thought they understood how it worked, but then we learned that no, it's a unique case, and I think this is just really, really fascinating that you can develop something like that. That turning point, that shift of expectations. I want you to think of your magic systems like that, and that's why I actually think Jurassic Park is a good case for understanding these things. And there's many other examples for how the things work, but it's a really nice balance, and I think you can really broaden how you develop these systems if you think of it like that. Well, where does this leave us with our own world that we started building in the last episode? Well, I will start using the saw method to develop our magic system further in our world, and I'll try to indicate what mode of the saw method I'm in, just to keep everything clear. So in our world, magic is represented by the artifacts created by the gods, and so far they're only sort of this analog to weapons, and they sort of act as a balance of power. But we also know a little bit about the conflicts that these artifacts have created in the world, so maybe we can build on that a bit more and create some spark and curiosity. Limitations in the magic system can be quite interesting. We know that humans only have magic when they use these artifacts, but now we also know that the Lightbringers lost their power. So that hints to some other limitation, or maybe something else happened to make them stop working. And could this also happen to the rings of the Warlocks of Fire? I want to explore this a little bit. To keep everything clear for the purpose of this world building series, I will develop my magic system in sort of a hierarchy of softer to harder magic systems. I think the closer we move to the gods' higher magic, the softer the magic becomes and more sort of flexible. And the closer we are to the humans, the more sort of tangible and hard the magic system becomes. It makes it so that the hard magic system becomes a tool for both world building but also for telling our stories, and most of our stories will probably take place amongst the humans. So I imagine a hierarchy of sorts, maybe reflected in the gods themselves, so that the more powerful gods created the more powerful artifacts, like the Lightbringers. Overall, these artifacts are more powerful than other artifacts, but they cannot be fully controlled or mastered by the humans, because the artifacts is always under the wishes of the original creator, the god themselves. On the other hand, the Warlocks carries the Rings of Fire. They're much less powerful than the Lightbringers, but they're also much more straightforward to use and control by the humans, and in turn maybe these rings also been created by lesser gods. I think I like this idea. It allows me to be pretty flexible. If I get a new idea for something to add to the magic system, then I sort of have this spectrum that allows for the different ideas. I've always liked it when magic systems have great costs, so maybe we can introduce that somehow. Perhaps all the artifacts have a unique rule set for that specific artifact for it to function. Something simple could be that the Rings of Fire can produce fire, but to balance it out, something else has to cool, and maybe that thing that has to cool is the user's hand, so it becomes colder around where the ring is placed on your hand, literally pulling the heat from the user's hand. I think convention suggests that the hands should burn up instead as fire rages through this ring, but I sort of like this idea of balance of powers. I think having these costs and limitations to the fire rings, where the user has to both wear the ring, but also it slowly removes the heat from their hand and maybe even freezes it, and that puts a limit on how long they can use the ring for. And then we could imagine the Warlocks would have to switch out the rings with each other to sort of share the load. We could also then introduce an ice ring, which has the opposite effect of the fire ring, and then you could wear both of them and it would sort of cancel out the effect of each other. But then you would have to, every time you want to heat something, you would have to cool something else down as well. Also trying to break convention a little bit. I think instead of just having the rings emit and project fire, I think I want the rings to be able to choose an area and then raise the temperature within that area. And then perhaps if they shrink the area, they can raise the temperature faster. And again, if it's a bigger area, it goes slower. I think that sort of makes sense. So you could heat up the area around somebody's sword and slowly melt it, or you could concentrate the point right at the bottom of the sword and then quickly melt the sword so that it would bend over. So you can use it sort of strategically in that sense, which I think is rewarding for the audience. Alright, this is already a lot more interesting to me, but how do the Lightbringers fit into all of this? We haven't really talked about them much, so let's try to develop them a bit. We might ask ourselves, why have they stopped working, and then find a limitation through that, and sort of through story in that sense. Well, if the Lightbringers have a connection to the god that crafted them, then perhaps the user has to be aligned with the god's faith somehow. Maybe the Lightbringers were created as tools for peacekeeping, but if a user steps out of alignment with the god's faith, they stop working. So maybe something has happened at the higher workings of the Citadel that's made all the Lightbringers stop working. Maybe the Citadel has gotten out of complete alignment with the god that they were following otherwise. Something not entirely within their control. Or maybe this new dark foe has something to do with it, knowing that it would bring unease to the Citadel's alliance with the Fire Warlocks. I think I like this idea that the Citadel has sort of lost their way, and they sort of lost the right to use the Lightbringers because their faith, or the faith they think they have, has gotten out of alignment with the original thoughts and hopes for the gods that created these Lightbringers as a peacekeeping tool. And perhaps even this dark foe has something to do with what happened here and bringing them to the tipping point where the Lightbringers no longer work. But either way, I think I like to go with it in this direction. For what the Lightbringers actually do themselves, I think I'll explore that further later on. But definitely I want to go in the vein of sort of these areas that can be controlled in a certain way, and then maybe build upon that a little bit. Alright, like in the last episode, I've gone ahead and done a few more iterations of the magic systems and just build on it a bit more. Now, this is by no means a complete picture of the entire magic system. That's something that will develop over time. But what I would like to do here is give a sort of aesthetic example of the magic system in the world by sort of creating this in-world image of the magic system, and hopefully this will help depict how the magic system is supposed to feel and overall what it is I'm going for. So this is something told from the point of view of a scholar at the Citadel. With the immense power given to us by the Lightbringers, many believe that the wielders of these artifacts become the very gods who created them. Others believe that these artifacts are the gods themselves. Both are false, of course. The Citadel knows that only by the God of Light's mercy and our dedication to his cause are a few among us worthy to wield this power. Our text tells us that the God of Light himself stepped down from heaven and gifted these artifacts to the chosen few worthy of the light. Not like those warlocks of the north and their cursed rings of fire. Their demonic trinkets tear away at their own flesh and bone, so they take their turns to endure their corrupt power. No doubt death and gods of trickery were involved in creating such unholy jewelry. Candidates for the Lightbringers have grown thin in the last decade. We will have to expand the light beyond the Citadel and show all the light of peace and prosperity to ensure a good assortment of candidates to take upon the mantle and honor of the Lightbringers for future generations. Alright, so that was a little snippet of an in-world understanding of the magic system. I think writing and playing around with the Citadel scholars' interpretation of the magic really helped cement sort of what's going wrong in the Citadel. And I think this is an example of how the aesthetics can help influence the larger world build. For me now, when I hear this scholar sort of talk about the magic, I imagine that there's sort of this arrogance going on in the Citadel, and they sort of very easily lost their way because they think they just need to expand, and clearly they're losing good candidates for the Lightbringers, so something must be wrong in their mind. And I think this sort of just cements that, so I really wanted to share that with you guys. Alright, so there was lots of things about magic systems that wasn't covered in this video, but I really wanted to take my interpretation on this and share some thoughts that I don't think have been shared that much in other places. And there's lots of great videos on magic systems, and we'll keep on building, and things can always change. But as of now, I'm pretty excited as to where we might go. And you know what, please continue the discussion in the comments. If you have some opinion on magic systems or some tips and tricks, please share them with everyone else. Well, that is pretty much it for now. As always, thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.